10 cute crawler tractors you've never seen. Tiny machines, big charm. They weren't built for war. They don't pull tankers, flatten forests, or climb glaciers. And they're never featured in industrial showrooms. But ask any vineyard farmer, hillside grower, or collector of forgotten machines, and they'll tell you these are the crawlers that stay in memory. In this episode, we go beneath the steel giants and into the world of compact track tractors, machines with narrow frames, short engines, and unexpected precision. Some were built for greenhouses. Others survived in steep terraces, designed to do the quiet work that larger machines simply couldn't. Most were never exported. Some were never even cataloged. But all of them were real, functional, and in many ways, perfectly engineered for their time. This is not a list of what's most powerful. It's a record of what was just right, even when no one was looking. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 10th, International Cub Crawler Conversion. The familiar red shape is unmistakable. A small, rounded hood, a narrow seat straddling the center line, and a soft mechanical clatter that once echoed across backyard gardens and orchard rows in 1950s America. To most, it looks like a typical farmall Cub, the smallest production tractor international harvester ever made. But take a second look. This one doesn't roll, it crawls. Instead of rear wheels, this Cub runs on tracks, steel or rubber, hand-fitted, custom-aligned, often welded by torchlight in farm workshops far from any factory. It's not a production model. International Harvester never officially built a Cub crawler, but farmers and machine builders did because they needed it. Initially launched in 1947, the Farmall Cub was designed as an affordable and lightweight solution for small acreage farms. It had a 4-cylinder gasoline engine just shy of 10.5 horsepower at the PTO, and a turning radius so tight it could loop inside an orchard row without disturbing a single root. Its narrow frame, under 45 inches wide, was ideal for gardening, mowing, light tilling, and poultry farm chores. But not every environment cooperated. In hilly orchards, muddy berry fields, and soft-bottom groves along the eastern seaboard, standard wheel traction wasn't enough. The light frame floated, but sometimes it floated too much. Slippage wasted fuel, broke rows, and left fields half done. The solution didn't come from engineers in suits. It came from toolboxes on the back of farm trucks. Enter the crawler conversion. Beginning in the late 1950s and peaking during the early 60s, farmers, particularly in parts of Canada and the northern U.S., began adapting their Cubs using home-fabricated track kits. The process was complex. The rear axle was replaced with a sprocket-driven assembly. Tracks were tensioned manually using modified idler wheels. Ground clearance dropped. Traction skyrocketed. There were no manuals, no factory diagrams. Every crawler Cub was a one-off. In Ontario, workshops like those in Hamilton, where IH Canada operated a plant, experimented with partial crawler setups for narrow-field tractors. Some believe that a small number of Cub crawler variants were officially commissioned through Canadian distributors. However, no confirmed records exist. Most surviving models today are undocumented, unserialized, and hand-built without apology. And that's where the magic lies. These machines blur the line between tool and art. One might have salvaged Alice Chalmers rollers. Another might use bespoke chain drives mounted on repurposed combine parts. The control levers often look improvised, yet function with precision. In a collector's show, they stand out, not because they roar, but because they whisper history. On soft soil, crawler Cubs do what no standard Cub ever could. Their low ground pressure and steady crawl make them perfect for vineyards, greenhouses, or raised bed fields. Restoration mechanics marvel at the ingenuity, as balance, weight distribution, and driveline math all had to be recalculated by hand. And somehow, they worked. Today, crawler-converted Cubs appear at vintage tractor shows, parked beside their wheeled siblings. Some retain the classic Farmall red, others are painted black or olive drab, each telling the story of the hands that built them. They attract not the biggest crowds, but the most curious ones. Collectors lean in close. Children stare at the tracks. Restorers ask to take photos of the undercarriage. No two are identical, no two were mass-produced, and none will ever roll off a factory line again. These aren't just tractors. They're mechanical signatures, each one stamped not by a brand, but by a moment in time when utility, necessity, and invention met halfway down a muddy orchard row. Ranked ninth, ISEKI 21600 Crawler, Japan's tiny tractor that climbs like a goat. Perched on the slope of a hillside orchard, rolling slowly between rows of terrace soil, it moves with a softness rarely seen in tracked machines. Compact, bright, precise. This isn't military surplus or a re-engineered bulldozer. It's a converted ISEKI TU-1600, one of Japan's most miniature production tractors, fitted with a crawler kit not found in any manual. Initially designed for small-scale Japanese farms, the TU-1600 was part of ISEKI's broader strategy in the 1980s to deliver lightweight, versatile machines to rural growers. The tractor featured a compact two-cylinder diesel engine pushing just 16 horsepower. Small by global standards, but ideal for maneuvering between orchard trees, raised vegetable beds, and narrow paths carved into volcanic soil. What made the TU-1600 stand out wasn't what it was, but what it could become. Farmers working in northern and central Japan, particularly in Nagano and Shizuoka, began adapting the TU-1600 with crawler conversion kits. These weren't hobbyist modifications, they were practical solutions, born from the need to operate on wet, uneven, or sloped terrain without tearing up root systems or sliding into drainage canals. The rear tires were removed and replaced by rubber or steel track assemblies. Often locally sourced, these kits were installed in workshops or cooperatives, not factories. The added traction allowed the TU-1600 to crawl, not roll, lowering its center of gravity and letting it cling to terrain that would stall most compact tractors. Some conversions added mini front blades for clearing brush. Others mounted a small winch or even a box sprayer on the back of the vehicle. The engine didn't change, but the application did. Suddenly, this modest utility tractor could plow, plant, and push in places no wheeled model dared to go. It wasn't rare in Japan, but it was invisible to the rest of the world. That changed when gray market exports reached Southeast Asia. TU-1600 crawlers began showing up in hillside durian farms in Vietnam, passion fruit rows in Thailand, and even municipal greenhouses in Taiwan. Their form factor, roughly one-third the size of a standard U.S. compact tractor, made them ideal for urban agriculture and farming on steep gradients. Today, few outside Asia have ever seen a crawler TU-1600, and fewer still realize they were never factory-built this way. But at collector shows in California, Oregon, or Quebec, the rare appearance of one triggers surprise and a cascade of questions. Is that a toy? Is it electric? Is that real? It is. And it was made not in a factory, but in a field workshop, guided by the needs of real terrain and real farmers. As modern agriculture shifts toward larger, sensor-integrated machines, the converted TU-1600 represents something nearly lost. Regional adaptation through engineering improvisation. It didn't follow a template. It followed the slope of the land and earned its place in tractor history by never pretending to be more than it was. A 16-horsepower crawler, built to go slow, go small, and go places no one expected it to. Ranked 8th, Track Marshall 55 Vineyard. The only 4-ton crawler built to fit between grapevines. At first glance, it looks wrong. Too wide, too heavy, too loud. Everything a vineyard tractor shouldn't be. But then it moves slowly, precisely, threading between grapevine trellises like it was built for them. Because in a way, it was. This is the Track Marshall 55 Vineyard Edition, a machine that rewrites what a crawler can be. Built in England between the 1960s and early 1980s, the Track Marshall 55 was renowned across the UK as a robust, mid-size crawler for upland farming. Its Perkins diesel engine delivered more than 60 horsepower. Its chassis was boxy and armored. Its levers needed 2 hands and a bit of patience. But a few farms, very few, requested something different. Somewhere between Sussex and Cornwall, Marshall engineers began quietly producing narrow-width versions of the TM55. These weren't official catalog models. They weren't announced. But they were real. Vineyard-ready crawlers with ultra-thin fenders, lowered exhausts, and control arms pulled in close to the operator. The goal? Fit a 4-ton crawler into rows meant for human feet and hand shears. And somehow, they succeeded. These Vineyard TM55s ran on steel tracks just wide enough to carry their own weight across wet clay without sinking. The rear drawbar allowed for the attachment of spray rigs, harvest carts, or even light tillage gear. Their center of gravity was low enough to crawl sideways across a slope without tipping, and strong enough to recover if they started to. The engine sound, deep, gravelly, unmistakably British, echoed through the vines. And yet the machine's presence was quiet. No showboating, no posturing, just a slow, methodical advance. To most passers-by, it looked too big for the job, but to the vineyard owners who ran them, the TM55 Vineyard was perfect. Overbuilt, underpowered, and utterly dependable. Few were made, fewer survived. By the 1990s, hydrostatic drives, compact Kubotas, and articulated specialty crawlers made machines like this feel outdated. The narrow TM55s were parked in sheds, sold off, or left behind in rows they once served. Today, the ones that remain are almost mythical. Collectors hear about them more than they see them. There are no part numbers for the narrow kits, no records of serial splits, only photos, grainy, sun-drenched, and stories. But when one does appear, it stops people. It's not the paint, it's the proportions. A crawler that looks like it belongs on a construction site, quietly tucked under a vine canopy, barely clearing the trunks, moving with measured weight. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't need to. There are faster vineyard tractors, smoother, smarter, but none look like this. None feels like this. And none leave quite the same impression when they disappear between the rows. Ranked 7th, Satoh Elk Crawler. Japan's quietest tractor comes with 2 seats. It has 2 seats. That's the first thing people notice. A crawler tractor barely 1 meter wide, painted in warm red-orange enamel, with a steel track system no larger than a commercial snowblower, and 2 seats. One for the operator and a second, smaller perch bolted just above the rear fender. It's not there for comfort. It's there because someone thought it might be needed. This is the Satoh Elk Crawler, a micro-scale track tractor designed in Japan during the late 1960s, and one of the most unusually proportioned machines in agricultural history. Satoh was never a volume giant like Yanmar or Kubota. However, in the decades following World War II, it carved out a loyal following, specializing in small, highly functional tractors for Japan's narrowest farm spaces, such as greenhouses and mountain fields. It was noted that mechanization had previously defied expectations. The Elk series, named ironically after one of the largest land animals, was anything but large. Weighing under 700 kilograms and powered by a 2-cylinder diesel engine, producing between 11 and 14 horsepower, the Elk could slip through openings smaller than a cattle gate. The steering radius was compact enough to turn between narrow irrigation lines without scraping a thing. What made the crawler version different wasn't just the tracks, it was the balance of design and absurdity. Most small track tractors look like stripped-down versions of larger crawlers. The Satoh Elk Crawler didn't. It looked like something out of a toy catalog. Curved lines, low center of gravity, soft industrial curves, and then that second seat. It wasn't just ornamental. In some uses, the second seat supported a sprayer assistant, a loader guide, or a child helping with vine pruning. In other cases, it wasn't used at all, but it was always there, bolted in as if the machine expected company. The crawler system was lightweight, with narrow steel links custom-built for soft terrain. Despite its miniature size, the Elk had surprising traction in wet loam or on uneven paddy field edges. Unlike heavier crawlers that chewed up rows, the Elk could work in greenhouses with vinyl floors without causing ruts. Production records are sparse. Satoh merged with Mitsubishi in the early 1980s, and documentation of crawler variants faded into obscurity. Some believe fewer than 100 Elk crawlers were ever produced. Fewer than 30 are known to exist today, mainly in Japan, Taiwan, or the garages of eccentric collectors who specialize in functional miniatures. Unlike the machines that came before or after, the Elk doesn't present itself with a sense of purpose. It doesn't threaten nor impress. It simply waits, still, squat, low to the ground, like a creature too shy to speak. There are no loud levers, no oversized gauges, no grand story of conquest or global export. A machine built for a space almost no one else had entered. A machine that doesn't take over the landscape. It fits inside it. And when it's turned off, with both seats empty, it looks more like a question than an answer. Ranked 6th, Fiat 605C Super, the mid-size crawler that outlived the farm. Bright orange, a color that doesn't blend into the hills but never tries to. In the vineyards and olive terraces of southern Europe, that color means one thing: a Fiat 605C Super is working. Produced in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the 605C Super was Fiat's response to the demand for mid-size crawlers in Italy, Greece, Tunisia, and rural Spain. It wasn't built to impress collectors. It was built to work and to keep working long after the paint faded. Under the hood, a 4-cylinder diesel engine, Fiat 803 5.02, delivers just over 60 horsepower. The gearbox features a mechanical 8-speed forward and 2-speed reverse transmission. The controls are all steel levers. No electronics, no hydraulics unless retrofitted. Everything was physical, direct, and mechanical. But performance wasn't the only thing that made this crawler stand out. It was designed. The 605C Super had curves, not something crawler tractors were known for. The hood arched gently. The seat sat low inside a sculpted fender set. Even the exhaust stack leaned forward as if the machine was already mid-step. It looked intentional, industrial but not aggressive. And then there was the size. Unlike its larger siblings, the 605C could crawl between vineyard rows and orchard groves with minimal disturbance. On narrow terraces, it didn't lean. On loose gravel, it didn't slide. And on hills too steep for rubber tires, it climbed. The track system was compact and reliable, built to withstand thousands of hours of use without requiring an overhaul. A single operator could service most of the drivetrain with a wrench and a vise. The fuel tank was simple, the filters changeable in the field. It was the kind of machine that came with no surprises, and that's what farmers trusted. Many worked year-round, spray rigs in spring, harvest trailers in autumn. Sometimes they pulled irrigation reels. Sometimes they just moved crates. But wherever they went, they were seen, because that orange could not be missed. Today, some 605C Supers are still in daily use. You'll find them in Sicily, pulling carts of tomatoes, and in Cyprus, flattening almond rows after plowing, and in hillside vineyards in Emilia-Romagna, where their size, sound, and silhouette feel as familiar as the vines themselves. They're not fast. They don't look modern, but they don't pretend to. A few collectors in France and Germany have begun restoring them, bringing back the factory color, sourcing original Fiat decals, and polishing the gear knobs. But most owners don't bother. They leave them as is, scratched, dented, and fully operational. Because nothing about this machine was ever for show. It was always about one thing: dependability. No touchscreens, no diagnostic ports, no startup sequence. Just turn the key, warm the block, and pull the lever. And it still works, decades later. Ranked 5th, Kubota T15 Crawler. The tractor built to work where others can't even fit. It's barely a meter wide. No cab, no electronics. Just a 2-cylinder diesel engine, a steel seat, and a set of narrow tracks that seem too small to carry anything of substance. But the Kubota T15 Crawler isn't about presence. It's about fitting in places no other tractor will go. Initially designed for use in Japan's dense terraced agricultural zones, the T15 is one of the most miniature factory-built crawler tractors ever made. At just over 15 horsepower and weighing under 700 kilograms, it could be mistaken for a lawn machine until you see it plow. Its true strength lies not in what it can pull, but where it can reach. Greenhouses with 1.8-meter ceilings. Tea fields are layered along sloping mountain ridges. Vineyards are so narrow that even walking with a tool cart requires precision. In these spaces, the T15's dimensions become its greatest asset. With steel tracks no wider than a human foot and a turning radius tighter than a compact car, it operates where traditional tractors would stall, or worse, destroy the crops. Its low-slung chassis keeps the center of gravity close to the ground. Even on uneven slopes, it hugs the terrain. There's no suspension, no onboard display. The controls are tactile, including the clutch, gear stick, and hand throttle. Everything you touch does something mechanical. There's no buffer between the operator and the field, and that's precisely what farmers needed. In Japan's post-war decades, farmland was fragmented, narrow, and labor-intensive. Machines like the T15 weren't designed to replace labor. They were intended to assist it without disrupting the layout of the land. Their small footprint preserved root systems. Their weight was distributed evenly across the track surface, preventing rutting in soft soil. And then there's the sound. At idle, the T15 hums gently. Under load, it growls, but never roars. It speaks in the tone of a machine that knows its place. Most T15s were used until they could no longer be. Maintenance was minimal. Parts were shared with other Kubota compacts. When one finally broke down, it was often stripped for parts. Its chassis left rusting near the greenhouse it once served. Very few made it out of Japan. Even fewer made it into collections. But those that did, when restored, draw the same reaction everywhere. Is that thing real? Yes, real engine, real steel, real crawler performance, just smaller. Today, the Kubota T15 exists as a mechanical paradox. Too small to be intimidating, too capable to be ignored. You won't find it at a dealership. You won't see it in brochures. And most people who pass it on a trailer assume it's a toy. But the farmers who used it never did. They saw what it could do. They remembered how little space it needed to work. And for a machine built to disappear between rows, that might be the only recognition it ever needed. Ranked fourth, Holder A10 Crawler. Germany's Vineyard ghost tractor. It's barely taller than the Vineyard fence post. You don't hear it coming. Then it turns, slowly, precisely, and disappears again between rows of vines less than a meter apart. This is the Holder Crawler A10, a machine designed not to dominate the land, but to vanish inside it. Built in post-war Germany during the 1950s and early 60s, the Holder A10 was a crawler tractor engineered for one purpose: work where no other machine could even stand. In the steep vineyard slopes of Baden-Württemberg, where tractors couldn't turn and horses couldn't hold their footing, something smaller had to be built. So Holder built small, but not weak. The A10 ran on a single-cylinder engine, either gasoline or diesel, putting out around 10 horsepower. That sounds insignificant. However, when combined with a complete steel track system in a featherlight frame, it was sufficient to pull implements up inclines that wheeled tractors would otherwise slide down. It wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, but it was unreasonably capable. And then there was the design. No cab, no protection. Just a thin metal frame, a forward-mounted seat, and fenders so close to the body that from the side, it looked like a child's toy. In some variants, the controls were set sideways, built for a seated driver to operate with minimal arm movement, even when the machine tilted. Painted in matte olive green or soft industrial blue, it didn't draw attention. It hid in the shadows of vines, in fogged morning rows, beneath canopies of fruit and frost. And in that hiding, it thrived. The steering was mechanical, while the braking was manual. If you pushed the A10 too hard, it wouldn't stall. It would just keep crawling forward, slowly, until something stopped it. And nothing usually did. What made it special wasn't what it did, but what it was. It was how little it asked to do it. Less than 600 kilograms, less than a meter wide. However, it had traction and torque that outperformed those of larger machines. Its narrow profile meant it could run entire vineyards without ever brushing a vine, and its low exhaust and compact cooling system made it suitable for hot, dry days when larger engines would choke on dust. Very few were exported. Holder A10s were tools built for a specific landscape, a specific crop, and a specific generation of growers. When their time passed, they were either scrapped or stored, usually forgotten in sheds, mistaken for something broken. But for those who know, the moment they see one, they stop. Because the A10 doesn't announce itself. It's already working by the time you realize it's there. Today, surviving units are almost exclusively found in Germany. Occasionally, one appears in a private museum in Austria or the collection of a vineyard owner in Switzerland. No two look the same, each modified slightly, repainted, reconfigured. But all share the same silhouette, a low, quiet crawler that fits into places most machines can't even enter. It doesn't pull attention, it pulls rows, and then it disappears again, into the vines without a sound. Ranked third, Pasquali 986 Crawler, the vineyard machine that moves like no other. At a glance, it looks too small to matter. A green body, short tracks, a two-cylinder diesel hum that barely rises above the birds. But in the vineyard lanes of Tuscany, the Pasquali 986 Crawler was the machine you didn't notice, until everything got done faster. Built in the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, the 986 Crawler was Italy's answer to a quiet challenge. How do you mechanize rows only 1.2 meters apart, on a slope, without damaging the vines? The answer wasn't power, it was a shape. The Pasquali 986 came with a Lombardini air-cooled diesel engine, delivering between 18 and 20 horsepower. Not a lot by crawler standards, but paired with a lightweight chassis and a low-slung track system, it became almost weightless over loose terrain. The clutch response was sharp, the throttle was feather-sensitive, and the turning radius, surprisingly tight, even for a crawler. Unlike other compact crawlers that traded agility for simplicity, the 986 kept both. The control layout was pure mechanical logic. Floor clutch, hand gear shift, dual brake sticks, spaced just right. Drivers often said you didn't operate it, it flowed through you. But that wasn't the only reason it stood out. The 986 had an aesthetic rarely seen in machines this small. It was curved, clean, deliberate. The engine hood sloped gently toward the track guards. The instrument panel was minimal, yet symmetrical. The green paint, deep, almost forest-like, felt more like a garden tool than a tractor. And that's precisely what it was. In tight, stone-lined vineyards where millimeters mattered, the 986 didn't just fit, it floated. Its steel tracks were narrow but grippy, using a hybrid tread pattern that allowed traction without tearing up the roots. Its center of gravity sat impossibly low, letting it tilt, correct, and continue. Where most small tractors would bounce or slip, it was quiet, not silent, but respectful. The kind of engine tone that lets workers harvest by hand beside it without shouting. The type of movement that never felt rushed, even under pressure. And it kept going. Through olive groves, between fig trees, across terraces cut by hand generations ago. For farmers who used it, the Pasquali 986 became a tool you didn't replace. Even after newer machines came in with power steering and digital gauges, many kept the 986. For spraying, for hauling, for that one tight row no other crawler could reach. Today, surviving units are rare outside Italy. A few made it to Spain, fewer still to Argentina. But most stayed where they belonged, hidden in the sheds of small farms, still starting every spring. They're not flashy, they're not loud, but they're exactly right. Some collectors restore them, polish the bodywork, and repaint the original green. But others leave them weathered, because a machine that's perfect in motion doesn't need cosmetic help. The Pasquali 986 Crawler wasn't built for a showroom. It was built for vineyards that are too difficult to explain on paper. And when it moves, slow, exact, and unshakable, it doesn't demand recognition. It simply proves it was always the right tool. Ranked second, Caterpillar 10, the smallest crawler Cat ever built. In a company known for giants, it was the smallest thing they ever made. The Caterpillar 10, built from 1930 to 1932, remains the most compact production crawler ever released by Caterpillar Tractor Company. While later generations of D-Series bulldozers would tower above fields and reshape continents, the 10 was different. It wasn't built for scale, it was built for survival. Released during the height of the Great Depression, The 10 was Caterpillar's offering to small farmers, people who had land, but no money for horses and no room for larger machinery. It was intended for one job: help growers hold on to their farms, one slow furrow at a time. The machine weighed just under 2,000 pounds, stood less than 4 feet tall, and was powered by a gasoline-fueled 4-cylinder engine. The output, modest, about 15 drawbar horsepower. But paired with narrow steel tracks, a compact gearbox, and a minimalist control layout, it offered something new for its time: crawler performance in a footprint smaller than a pickup truck. The controls were stripped down to basics: hand throttle, gear lever, clutch pedal, steel seat, and a crank starter up front. No electrics, no battery, just steel, cast iron, and gasoline. But for many small growers, it was everything. The 10 could plow small fields without compacting soil. It could drag carts across soft ground after rain, where horses would flounder. It could navigate tight orchard rows and turn almost in place. It wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. It was consistent, predictable, and above all, repairable. Its form was part of the appeal. Unlike later, squared-off crawler frames, the Caterpillar 10 featured soft arcs, including a rounded hood, curved fenders, and a narrow saddle tank positioned just behind the operator. From a distance, it looked less like a tractor and more like a mechanical caterpillar, hence the name. By the time production ended in 1932, fewer than 5,000 units had been made. Caterpillar had already begun shifting toward larger, more standardized machines. The world was recovering, slowly, and farms were starting to scale again. The 10 faded from the product line, but it didn't vanish. Many units remained in use across California, Washington, Nebraska, and other areas where ground needed to be worked and margins were thin. The small engine kept running. The track links held, and when parts failed, they were re-welded, repurposed, remade. The 10 wasn't replaced, it was reused. Today, surviving Caterpillar 10s are prized by collectors, not because they're powerful, but because they mark a specific moment in American agricultural history. A moment where simplicity wasn't a compromise, it was a requirement. You'll find them at tractor shows tucked between D4S and 33s. Some were restored to pristine condition, their olive gray paint shining in the sun. Others still wear the dust of real work, unrestored, unpolished, unpretentious. They don't turn heads for size or speed. They draw attention because of what they represent. The Caterpillar 10 was not a prototype, not an experiment, not a luxury. It was the bare minimum, delivered to people who needed exactly that. A machine that proved, even at Caterpillar scale, small could still be enough. In first place, Yanmar YC60, Japan's quietest crawler tractor, was built to vanish. It doesn't take much space or make much sound. The idle hum fades into birdsong. The tracks leave almost no mark behind. But when it moves, something shifts. Not the earth, just the pace of everything around it. This is the Yanmar YC60, a crawler tractor so small, so refined that most people miss it entirely. Built in Japan during the early 1980s, the YC60 was never mass-produced for export. It wasn't designed for flat fields or open farms. It was built for places with no straight rows, steep tea hills, terraced citrus groves, low canopy vineyards. Places where no full-size tractor could turn, and even walking with a basket required balance. At just under 700 kilograms, with a 2-cylinder diesel engine putting out around 15 horsepower, it doesn't sound like much, but the proportions are deliberate. The frame, narrow enough to glide through shoulder-high hedges. The height, low enough to duck beneath trellised fruit lines. The gearing is precise enough to inch forward on inclines, where standing still requires effort. Nothing is wasted, not power, not metal, not movement. There is no cab, no comfort seat. The steering wheel sits low, framed between two small round lights. The levers are tight, the exhaust is short. Everything in the YC60's design obeys one rule: do just enough and no more. Its steel tracks aren't loud. They tap, not slam. Its engine doesn't growl. It breathes. Even at work, it never breaks rhythm. For Japanese farmers, especially in regions like Wakayama and Ehime, the YC60 wasn't a luxury. It was a solution to silence, a tool that didn't interrupt the land it served. When used to plow between lines of green tea, the machine moved so precisely that a single leaf barely trembled. Most machines are built to conquer terrain. The YC60 was built to respect it, and that's why it's barely known outside Japan. Very few made it abroad. Fewer still survived the shift to hydrostatic systems. But those that remain, in sheds, behind barns, hidden beneath tarps, still run, still start on cold mornings, still idle without smoke. Collectors who find one speak less about its rarity and more about its feel. They mention the balance, the slow incline hold, the absence of resistance when shifting gears. It doesn't challenge the driver, it includes them. This is not a machine built for show. It's a machine built to disappear, into the work, into the slope, into the soundscape of early morning. And when it stops, engine silent, track still, vapor rising from the hood in cool air, there's nothing else to explain. The field has been worked, the path retraced, and the machine waits, without noise, without signal, without demand. It doesn't need to say more. It was enough just to be there. They were never meant to be admired. No one expected them to last this long, and yet they're still here, caked in dust, parked behind stone sheds, tracked slowly across rows where no tire dares follow. Most have no badges left, no manuals, no spare parts, but they still start. The world moved on to horsepower, to software, to scale. These machines didn't. They stayed small, because small was enough. In a world obsessed with what's next, these were the machines that quietly said, "This is what works."